I had been waiting for this cruise for months, imagining warm sunsets, endless buffets, and finally escaping the constant nagging of HOA rules. But the second I stepped onto the ship, I realized this vacation wasn't going to be a peaceful getaway, not because of rough seas or weather, but because HOA Karen had somehow tracked me down. Karen, the woman who could turn a perfectly trimmed hedge into a federal violation. My neighbor, self-appointed sheriff of every rule in our community, who somehow believed her authority extended beyond the borders of our neighborhood, and now she was on my cruise. I remember seeing her from across the deck, clipboard in hand, scanning the ship like it was a crime scene. Her eyes locked on the pool chairs, and she marched over like a general inspecting troops. "Excuse me," she said loudly, tone sharp enough to cut glass. "These chairs aren't aligned properly. Someone should fix this immediately." I froze. Did she really just try to enforce HOA rules on a cruise ship? I looked at my family, expecting laughter, but even they had that tense smile that meant we're in trouble. Karen didn't stop there. She moved on to the towels, scrutinizing the way they were folded, making notes in that dreaded clipboard of hers. "Folded incorrectly," she muttered. "This is unacceptable." I had to bite my lip to stop myself from laughing and crying at the same time. How could one person have this much energy for control? At first I tried to ignore her. Maybe if I stayed silent she'd move on. But Karen had that unstoppable confidence that made you feel like any opposition was illegal. She made her way through the buffet, inspecting plates and napkins, muttering about hygiene standards like she was running a 5-star restaurant. I felt the first flicker of real panic. This wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous for my sanity. Every step she took, every sharp glance she gave made my stomach tighten. How could someone so obsessed with rules forget that this was a vacation, that this ship belonged to the captain, not HOA Karen? And then she did something that made my jaw drop. She marched toward a group of passengers, wagging her finger at them. "Excuse me, that's not how you line up. You need to follow the proper order." I wanted to sink through the deck, to disappear into the ocean, because at that moment, Karen wasn't just controlling me, she was trying to control everyone. My family tried to intervene gently. "Karen, it's a cruise, relax," my sister said, smiling nervously. But Karen didn't hear them. She never heard anyone who disagreed with her. She was on a mission, clipboard clutched like a weapon, eyes scanning for infractions like a hawk. As I followed her from a safe distance, I realized this wasn't going to be one of those vacations where you sip cocktails and forget about the world. This was going to be a test of patience, nerves, and honestly, how much absurdity one person can withstand before losing their mind. The sun dipped lower over the horizon, painting the ocean in fiery reds and golds. Everything about this moment should have felt magical, peaceful, perfect for a cruise. But there she was, striding across the deck, issuing commands to people who didn't even know her name. I felt my heart rate spike, a mix of dread and disbelief. For the first time, I realized that a vacation isn't just about escaping your daily life. It's about surviving the people who refuse to let you. And HOA Karen, she was about to make sure I didn't escape without a battle. I gripped the railing, trying to steady my thoughts. Somewhere deep down, I knew one thing. This cruise was about to become a war zone, and Karen had already claimed the first territory. I thought I had seen the worst of Karen when she was bossing people around the buffet, but I was wrong. I should have known better. Karen didn't just stroll onto this cruise to enjoy the ocean breeze, she came to rule it. It started subtly at first. I was sitting on the deck with my drink, trying to convince myself this vacation was salvageable, when I noticed her approaching the ship's lounge area. Her heels clicked against the deck with a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a battle drum. She stopped at the velvet ropes in front of the lounge and scanned the guests like a general inspecting an army. "Excuse me," she called out, voice sharp and commanding, echoing across the deck. "This line is unacceptable. People are standing too close together. Someone will get hurt." I froze. Did she just cite safety rules on a cruise? I looked around, half expecting the captain to appear and put her in her place, but no one moved. Guests were shifting nervously, unsure if they were supposed to obey or laugh. I could feel my heart pounding, not from fear, but from sheer anticipation of what she would do next. Then it happened. Karen marched toward the staff, tapping her clipboard insistently. "I need to speak with someone in charge. These lounge chairs are not compliant. This is chaos. I demand enforcement." I couldn't help but mutter under my breath, She's about to get herself arrested, or at least escorted off the ship. But Karen didn't care about subtlety or consequences, she never did. As she approached the receptionist, my stomach sank. Karen opened her mouth and unleashed what could only be described as a HOA manifesto at sea. She recited rules, regulations, and imaginary fines with such confidence it made my skin crawl. If these cushions are not adjusted to the proper angle, someone could suffer spinal injury. I am authorized to enforce compliance. The receptionist blinked, confused. I'm sorry, ma'am, but... No excuses, someone must act, Karen interrupted. She was a tornado of self-righteous fury. The passengers nearby were trying not to stare, but her voice carried across the deck like a foghorn in the night. I wanted to step in to pull her away politely, but I knew it would do no good. Karen had a way of ignoring logic that was truly terrifying. She believed she was the law and everyone else simply existed to follow it. I sank back into my chair, my fingers gripping the railing, and waited. Something told me this confrontation wasn't going to end well for Karen or for the rest of us. And then the whispers started. Guests exchanged glances, some giggling, some shaking their heads. I could feel the tension thickening. Everyone was holding their breath, watching this bizarre spectacle unfold. Karen, of course, didn't notice. She was too busy lecturing the young staff member about towel alignment and the proper angle of sun loungers. I glanced at my family, who looked at me with the same mix of horror and disbelief. She's actually doing it, my sister whispered. She's trying to control a cruise. At that moment I realized the truth. Karen had escalated beyond all reason. She wasn't just annoying, she was unstoppable, at least until someone with real authority stepped in. And deep down I knew one person could. One person who didn't care about HOA bylaws or self-appointed power trips. I couldn't see the captain yet, but I could feel the tension mounting. Something was about to give. Karen had pushed every boundary she could, and the passengers, once amused, now uncomfortable, were starting to murmur, quietly cheering for someone to finally put her in her place. The sunset painted the ocean in shades of fire, as if foreshadowing the inevitable showdown. Karen straightened her blazer, tapped her clipboard, and glared at the guests. She had no idea what was coming, but I did, and somehow, despite my nerves, I felt a thrill of anticipation. Because the next move would change everything. And the captain, calm, authoritative, and entirely unshakable, was about to arrive. I could feel it coming, the moment when everything I thought I knew about vacations would shatter. Karen, clipboard in hand, had worked her way through the deck, lecturing staff, passengers, and anyone unfortunate enough to make eye contact. Her energy was unstoppable, like a hurricane dressed in a blazer. And then, like a spark ready to ignite gasoline, she set her sights on the highest authority on the ship, the captain. I watched from a safe distance as she approached the bridge entrance, muttering about unacceptable practices and safety violations. Her voice carried across the deck, sharp, commanding, full of that familiar sense of absolute entitlement. Passengers paused mid-step, holding drinks and cameras, because no one had ever seen a cruise devolve into a neighborhood HOA meeting until now. She thinks she can just tell the captain what to do, my sister whispered beside me, disbelief written across her face. I nodded, too stunned to respond. I had underestimated Karen. I had assumed the captain would arrive first and diffuse the tension, but Karen had her plan. She wanted to claim control before anyone else could. And then the bridge door opened. The captain emerged, calm and unshakable, his posture radiating authority. He didn't yell, he didn't wave his arms, and he certainly didn't panic. But the moment he walked onto the deck, I felt the entire atmosphere shift. Karen, who had been speaking a mile a minute, froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened, and I swear her clipboard started to tremble. I need to speak with the captain, she said, trying to regain composure, voice just a notch above command. There are violations happening on this ship, and someone must. Ma'am, the captain interrupted, calm but firm. I handle all rules and regulations on this vessel. Everything else is for the guests to enjoy. I almost laughed. Karen's face went pale, like someone had poured ice water over her head. She blinked rapidly, clearly trying to process the fact that her self-appointed authority had just been nullified in one sentence. But Karen didn't quit that easily. I understand, she said a little shakily, but as a professional with experience enforcing compliance. I appreciate your concern, the captain replied evenly, but your experience does not apply here. This is not your neighborhood, ma'am. The tension on the deck was palpable. Passengers started whispering, some stifling laughter, others wide-eyed with curiosity. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. The captain didn't raise his voice or get flustered. He simply stood there, calm as the ocean, and that quiet authority was enough to make Karen hesitate for the first time in her life. I felt a thrill run down my spine. Finally, someone was challenging her and doing it with total control. She tried one last move, pointing at a group of guests and waving her clipboard like a sword. But they're guests, the captain interrupted smoothly, and this ship is for their enjoyment. Please return to your cabin or enjoy the deck responsibly. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish, searching for words that would reassert her authority, but none came. Every person on deck was now watching her, some with amusement, some with relief, as if witnessing the impossible. HOA Karen humbled in public. I couldn't help but smirk, though I tried to hide it. The tension was thick, but there was also a strange sense of satisfaction. Karen had pushed her control to the limit, and the universe, in the form of this calm, unyielding captain, had pushed back. Even then, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't someone who could walk away quietly. She would escalate, she would strategize, and she would find the next weak point to exploit. And yet, for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone could finally show her that the ocean had rules she could not bend. As she stomped away, muttering under her breath, the captain turned to me with a small nod and a half smile. I realized right then that I wasn't just on a cruise anymore. I was in the middle of a full-blown standoff between order and chaos. And somewhere deep down, I knew the best was yet to come. I thought the captain had ended it, that Karen had finally realized the ocean wasn't a place for HOA rule enforcement. I was wrong, dead wrong. Karen doesn't understand the word stop. She's like a storm that only grows stronger when met with resistance. No sooner had she turned away from the captain than she began scanning the deck for her next target. Towels weren't folded correctly, chairs weren't aligned to her invisible grid, and someone, some poor unsuspecting guest, was sipping a cocktail in a way she clearly didn't approve of. I watched, half amused, half panicked, as she started marching from lounge to lounge, clipboard in hand, muttering about safety violations, etiquette, and imaginary fines. Passengers tried to step around her, but she didn't care. She had her mission and nothing would stop her. "Excuse me," she shouted at a man trying to relax with a book. "You're blocking the walkway, that's unacceptable, step aside immediately." The poor guy froze, his face went red. He mumbled something about following the rules, and Karen shook her head in disgust. She was relentless. I tried to pull myself together. This wasn't just funny anymore, it was escalating. I knew Karen would eventually come for the crew again, and if the captain hadn't fully shut her down the first time, she would try to find loopholes to push just a little further. And then she did. Karen marched straight up to the pool area where families were relaxing. She pointed at the lifeguards. That flotation device isn't placed correctly, someone could drown." I couldn't believe it. Drown? On a supervised cruise pool? She was losing her mind. The lifeguards exchanged bewildered glances, unsure whether to argue, laugh, or call security. The other passengers had started whispering and filming on their phones, clearly sensing that history was being made. I leaned over to my sister and whispered, "This is insane. She's actually trying to enforce HOA rules on a cruise ship. Does she realize the ocean doesn't care?" My sister snorted quietly, shaking her head. "She thinks the rules are universal," she said. "And apparently she's universal too." Karen, of course, heard us and glared. "Excuse me, I am serious about enforcement," she barked, pointing her finger like a gavel. I felt my stomach drop. This woman had no concept of personal boundaries, and her confidence made her terrifying. The suspense was unbearable. Every passenger on deck was now watching, holding their breath. Karen was about to escalate further, everyone could feel it. I clutched my drink, nervously pretending to sip, while secretly preparing for the inevitable chaos. And then the captain reappeared, calm, collected, and utterly unshakable. His presence alone made Karen hesitate, but she wasn't going to back down. She straightened her blazer, tapped her clipboard, and started listing her grievances again, louder this time. "This ship is in violation. Towels, chairs, lounge spacing, someone must take responsibility," she shouted, voice echoing over the deck. Passengers murmured in disbelief. Some stifled laughter, some shook their heads. I could feel the suspense building. Everyone was waiting for the moment the captain would finally put an end to her antics. The captain walked toward her slowly, deliberately, like a calm tide approaching a storm. Karen puffed up her chest, ready to argue, to fight, to assert her imagined authority. And I could see it in her eyes. This was her ultimate power play. She believed she could conquer the cruise. But the captain, he didn't panic, he didn't shout. He simply stopped in front of her, hands behind his back, and said 4 words that would freeze Karen in her tracks. "Ma'am, not here." The simplicity, the calm, the authority, it was devastating. Karen blinked, momentarily stunned. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. The passengers held their breath, sensing the shift. The storm had met the tide, and the tide was winning. I couldn't help but smile, a mix of relief and amusement washing over me. Finally, someone was setting boundaries, showing Karen that the world outside her HOA didn't bend to her will. But I also knew deep down that Karen wouldn't go quietly. She was a force of nature, and forces of nature don't disappear without a fight. And just like that, the suspense was at its peak. Karen stood frozen, muttering under her breath, and I realized that the real battle was just beginning. The cruise, once a peaceful escape, had transformed into a stage for a showdown that no one would forget. I thought I had seen the height of Karen's audacity when she was lecturing the lifeguards, but I was wrong. She was like a wildfire, once started, impossible to contain. And now she had her eyes set on the captain again, convinced that persistence could bend reality itself. "Captain, these violations cannot go unaddressed," she shouted, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "Someone must enforce the rules. Towels, lounge chairs, pool safety, it's unacceptable." I could feel my heart rate spike. Passengers were frozen, unsure whether to laugh, gasp, or intervene. Somewhere deep down, I knew this confrontation was about to reach its peak. The entire deck held its breath. The captain, calm as the ocean itself, didn't flinch. His presence alone seemed to suck the arrogance out of the air. He approached Karen slowly, deliberately, and stopped just a few feet away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't wave his hands. He simply looked at her with a steady, unshakable gaze. "Ma'am," he said calmly, each word deliberate, "this is a cruise ship. These are my rules. Guests enjoy their experience. You do not enforce rules here." Karen froze mid-gesture, her clipboard trembling slightly. The fire in her eyes flickered, like a candle struggling against a windstorm. I swear I could hear a collective gasp from the passengers around us. She opened her mouth, trying to retort, but the captain didn't give her a chance. "You are welcome to enjoy your vacation," he continued, voice steady, "but your authority ends at your cabin door." The simplicity of his statement hit Karen like a tidal wave. I watched her face drain of color, her confidence faltering. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. She was powerful in our neighborhood, yes, but here on the ocean she was powerless. "You don't understand," she sputtered, pointing at the guests, the pool, the chairs. "These people, this is a danger. Someone could get hurt." "And if someone were in danger," the captain replied, calm as ever, "my trained staff would handle it. Now please enjoy your vacation." I felt a shiver of relief mixed with awe. The captain didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He simply reminded Karen of reality, and reality for the first time pushed back. Passengers started murmuring in approval, some smiling, others nodding. For the first time, Karen wasn't the center of control, she was the center of quiet humiliation. But she wasn't done. Karen, desperate to regain dominance, tried one last tactic. She waved her arms, pointing at everyone. "If you don't follow my guidance, you will all be in violation." The captain interrupted again, his voice still calm but carrying absolute authority. "Ma'am, enough. This is your final warning. Any further disruption will result in removal from this deck." I could almost hear the collective gasp of the passengers. Karen froze completely, her jaw hanging open. She had no plan for this, no contingency. All her rehearsed speeches, all her imagined authority gone, extinguished by 4 words and calm conviction. I felt a surge of exhilaration. Finally, someone had challenged her and won, and the passengers, they were watching history unfold. Phones were out, cameras recording, whispers of approval spreading across the deck. Karen had become a spectacle, and the crowd loved it. Even from a distance, I could see her trying to recover, muttering under her breath, flipping through her clipboard as if there was some clause that could reverse reality. But the captain didn't move. He didn't argue, he didn't even smirk. His calm dominance made Karen's desperation even more glaring. And then in a final, almost cinematic moment, Karen stomped back toward her cabin, muttering about injustice and rule enforcement, while the passengers, relieved and secretly amused, exhaled collectively. I leaned against the railing, laughing quietly because I knew what this meant. The first wave of chaos had been contained, but the storm was far from over. I realized in that moment that vacations weren't always about relaxation. Sometimes they were about watching chaos collide with authority and savoring the exact moment when order prevailed. The captain had shut her down, yes, but Karen's obsession would linger, and somewhere in the shadows of the cruise ship, I could feel her plotting her next move. For a moment I thought the captain had finally tamed her, but Karen doesn't know how to quit. She's like a wildfire that refuses to die, even when doused in water. As soon as she stomped away from the captain, I could feel the storm brewing again. Her footsteps echoed across the deck, clipboard swinging violently, muttering to herself in that terrifying mix of indignation and desperation. "They think they can ignore me. They think they can defy the rules. This is unacceptable," she shouted under her breath, though everyone could hear her anyway. I tried to distract myself, sipping my drink, but the tension was palpable. Passengers nearby were whispering, some trying to stifle laughter, others wide-eyed and tense, unsure what she might do next. I realized something important. Karen's meltdown was about to become public, and there was nothing anyone could do but watch. She marched straight for the main deck, where families were lounging and kids were running around. Her eyes scanned for violations, whatever that meant: towels not folded to perfection, drinks placed incorrectly, someone sitting where she thought they shouldn't. Every tiny detail was now a personal affront. "Excuse me," she yelled at a man balancing a tray of drinks. "You are endangering everyone with your improper placement." The man froze, caught mid-step, tray wobbling precariously. I swear I could hear the collective gasp of passengers around us. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" And I muttered under my breath, "Welcome to HOA Hell Cruise Edition." Karen's fury was escalating, and I could feel it like electricity in the air. Every time someone ignored her, every small act of freedom, she grew louder, faster, more unhinged. She pointed at a group of kids playing near the pool. "Move them, they are in violation. Someone will get hurt if this continues." The lifeguards just stared, unsure whether to intervene or let this self-proclaimed enforcer have her fun. Some passengers pulled out their phones, recording the chaos, while others whispered prayers that the captain would intervene again. And then, in true Karen fashion, she tried her ultimate tactic. She attempted to rally the other passengers. "Everyone," she shouted, "you must follow the rules. This is unacceptable. Compliance is mandatory." For a second, the deck went silent. People looked at her like she had grown a second head. No one moved, no one obeyed, and that silence, it crushed her. I could see it in her eyes, the panic, the disbelief. Karen, who always believed everyone would bend to her will, had met total resistance. Her confidence faltered, her voice wavered, and she looked around desperately, seeking allies in a sea of amused, horrified, and secretly relieved passengers. The captain, noticing her escalation, returned to the deck. His presence was like a calm tide washing over a stormy shore. Karen, mid-rant, froze again. The sheer authority in his posture was enough to make her hesitate. "Ma'am," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the deck, "this behavior is not acceptable. You are creating a disruption. You may enjoy the cruise, but any further interference will not be tolerated." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. She waved her arms like a conductor of chaos, but the power had shifted. Passengers were whispering and laughing quietly, phones recording every moment. Karen, once untouchable, now looked utterly powerless. I felt a mixture of awe and satisfaction. Finally, the chaos she had created was being contained. But Karen, like all hurricanes, would not leave quietly. Her meltdown was spectacular, funny, terrifying, and completely mesmerizing. Everyone on deck was witnessing a full-blown spectacle, the kind of story you couldn't make up, the kind you'd replay in your head for years. She stomped away again, muttering about injustice and rule enforcement, shaking her clipboard violently. I leaned back against the railing, letting out a nervous laugh. The passengers were still watching, some whispering, some laughing quietly. And I realized this: the real climax was just around the corner. Karen wasn't done, not yet. Because no storm this big ever ends quietly, and I had a front row seat. By now the entire deck was buzzing. Passengers had gathered discreetly, whispering, filming, and exchanging glances that said, "Something extraordinary is happening." And it was. HOA Karen, the woman who always thought she ruled every inch of reality, was about to meet her match in front of an audience bigger than she had ever imagined. Karen, clipboard trembling in her hands, had been trying to regain control since the captain shut her down, but her attempts only drew more attention. Towels aligned perfectly, check. Chairs properly spaced, check. Guests enjoying their drinks, apparently unacceptable. She stomped toward the main deck again, muttering about rules and violations, unaware that every movement was being recorded by a growing crowd of amused passengers. I stayed back, gripping the railing, trying to suppress my nervous laughter. I had been watching her escalate for hours, but now it was about to reach its peak. I could feel it, the electricity in the air. Karen was about to get her first taste of public humiliation, and everyone on deck would witness it. The cruise director appeared suddenly, stepping confidently between Karen and the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice projecting across the deck, "it seems we have a situation with a guest enforcing rules that don't exist on this ship." Karen froze mid-step, blinking in confusion. The passengers whispered, some giggling quietly, others holding their phones higher, recording every word. I couldn't help but grin. The tension was palpable, every eye on Karen. Every word from the cruise director made her shrink a little more. "Ma'am," the director continued, pointing politely but firmly, "please be reminded that this is a vacation cruise. Guests are free to enjoy themselves without interference from outside rule enforcement. Towels, chairs, and behavior here are governed by the ship, not by neighborhood associations." I watched Karen's face go from red to pale in seconds. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked around desperately, as if expecting some invisible army of supporters to rise and enforce her will. But no one moved, no one obeyed, not a single person. "Failure to comply," the director added, "may result in removal from this deck for the duration of the cruise." Karen's eyes widened. I could see panic flicker across her face. She muttered something about injustice under her breath, but the camera phones were already capturing every second. Guests around her were whispering, some laughing quietly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The woman who once controlled neighborhoods now found herself powerless, exposed, and completely alone. I leaned closer to my sister and whispered, "I can't believe this is happening. She's actually being shut down publicly." She smirked, nodding, "It's poetic justice." Karen tried to speak again, flailing her clipboard, but the captain stepped forward, calm and commanding as ever. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but carrying authority, "please follow the cruise rules or return to your cabin. This is your final warning." The simplicity of it struck Karen like a lightning bolt. All her imagined authority, all her rehearsed speeches, all the moments she thought she could control, everything gone. She blinked repeatedly, muttering incoherently, and then finally she turned and stomped toward her cabin, muttering about rule enforcement and absolute chaos. The passengers around us exhaled collectively. Some whispered congratulations to the captain, others quietly celebrated the spectacle they had witnessed. I felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. Karen had tried to dominate the cruise, and in front of everyone her power had evaporated. As the sun dipped lower over the horizon, painting the ocean with fiery reds and golds, I realized something. The cruise had transformed from a vacation into a full-blown saga of chaos versus authority, and I had been lucky enough to witness the climax. Karen's meltdown had become legendary, the kind of story that people would retell for years. I glanced around at the passengers, many still shaking their heads and whispering about the audacity of HOA Karen. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the final chapter was coming, the one where Karen would retreat defeated, and the rest of us could finally enjoy our cruise in peace. The storm had passed, but the echoes of chaos still lingered, and I couldn't help but smile, knowing that sometimes the universe has a way of humbling even the most self-righteous people spectacularly. The sun was low on the horizon, casting golden streaks across the endless blue ocean, when I finally allowed myself to exhale. After hours of tension, chaos, and more HOA theatrics than I ever thought possible, the cruise deck was quiet, peaceful, even. The storm that was Karen had passed, at least for now. Karen had retreated to her cabin, muttering under her breath about injustice and rule enforcement, her clipboard still shaking from the sheer weight of defeat. She looked like a hurricane that had just been stopped by a calm sea. and I couldn't help but feel a quiet, triumphant satisfaction. I sank into one of the lounge chairs, letting the warm evening breeze brush against my face. Around me, passengers whispered quietly to each other, smiling, some chuckling, some shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had witnessed. I caught snippets. Did she really just? I can't believe someone tried to boss a cruise. That captain is amazing. I laughed softly to myself, still trying to process everything. From the moment Karen stepped onto this ship, I had feared the worst. She had escalated from towel policing to full-blown chaos, challenging the captain, frightening guests, and turning what should have been a relaxing vacation into a suspense-filled spectacle. And yet in the end, reality had prevailed. Authority, calm, and common sense had met the storm, and the storm had lost. The captain walked past, nodding subtly at me. There was a quiet confidence in his gaze, as if to say, "I handle this, don't worry." And in that moment I realized just how much tension had built around Karen's antics. She had tested everyone, staff, guests, and me, but one simple thing had been enough: firm, unshakable authority. I glanced around, taking in the scene. Families laughed quietly, children played in the pool without fear of being violating some imaginary rule, and the deck crew moved efficiently, finally able to breathe without Karen's constant surveillance. Even the lifeguards were smiling, their earlier confusion replaced by relief. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a strange sympathy for Karen. She wasn't evil, she was obsessive. A person who believed control was the solution to everything, but control has limits, and on this cruise she had hit them hard. And the universe, in the form of a calm, authoritative captain, had reminded her of that fact spectacularly. I sipped my drink, trying not to grin too widely as I replayed her meltdown in my mind. The way she had tried to rally the other passengers, the way her face had drained of color when confronted, the muttered threats that no one could hear but everyone witnessed. It was absurd, unbelievable, and unforgettable. I leaned back, letting the gentle sway of the ship rock me into calm. The chaos was over, at least for now. Karen had learned a lesson that day. The ocean had rules she couldn't bend. Authority existed outside of HOA bylaws, and sometimes the world simply refuses to obey her demands. And me, I had front row seats to it all. From her first steps onto the deck, to her frantic attempts to assert control, to the captain shutting her down with calm authority, to the final retreat into her cabin. It had been a roller coaster of suspense, laughter, and disbelief. As the sky darkened and stars began to shimmer above the endless horizon, I realized something important. Vacations aren't just about escaping everyday life. Sometimes they're about surviving it in new forms. Sometimes they're about watching chaos collide with authority and savoring the moment when balance is restored. I smiled, taking a deep breath of the salty ocean air. The cruise continued, laughter and music drifting across the deck. Guests were free to enjoy their vacation. And Karen, well, Karen would always be Karen, but for the rest of us the storm had passed. And for once, the ocean had reminded us all who really held the power. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.